I'm doing something slightly different with my compost bin setup. A little bit of an experiment, really. This was a quite hot compost bin. It's probably about 3 months old now. This mulch is pretty much usable, but what I've noticed is the worms have started to move in. So in a way, what I'm doing is kind of inoculating the composted material with worms, so I can move this material straight into my worm bed, so it's already off to a head start. The clay in the sort of fairly average soil, what I might do is just work that into the paths and then mulch with wood chips, so that gets a chance to help to break the wood chip down, and I'm not disposing of clay. I mean, the clay itself is reasonable stuff. It's just it needs lots of organic matter to get it to work to a workable state. So the idea with this is during the winter, when temperatures are down a little bit, if you've got a hot composting setup, you can get quite a lot of heat there, and you'll get ambient heat around the core sort of centre of the compost pile as well. So what I thought I'd do is like to try and use some of that heat and then work alongside with sort of vermicomposting in this sort of setup, so I can get ideal sort of optimum conditions and a little bit of warmth for the worms as well. But what I found is with these compost bins, when you've got a large heap, after it's sort of broken down, when it's maturing, you get a lot of settlement as the material reduces as it composts. So what I thought I'd do is rather than working in fresh material and always ending up with a pile that's mainly composted but it's got some fairly kind of newer bits and pieces in it as well, I'd sort of almost containerize it in these bins, and then I can have the two working alongside each other, so the heat from one kind of benefits the other, if that's the way it's going to work. But I don't know, this is about 3 foot by 4 foot, probably about 4 foot tall, and these bins are about 18 inches tall, sort of about 450 millimeters, something like that. And they're the same containers that I use for the worm bed, so they've got 20mm holes drilled around the outsides and in the base as well, and they stack, so that one's dug down into the compost pile and then that one's sitting on top. So another additional sort of feature of doing this is they hold 25 litres, or probably around about 25 kilos. I'm not sure, it might be slightly more than 25 because they're right sort of piled to the brim, as it were. So when it's time to empty the compost bin, rather than digging and moving and especially when you're turning the pile, you're forking it from one place, forking it back, and it makes a lot of mess, takes a lot of time. So what I thought I'd do, if I can have a spare one of these containers, I can just lift the container out 25 kilos at a time, tip it into another container that's completely sort of upside down, it's moved it around, and then rather than shoveling, it's already sort of done. So I don't know how many bins I'll need, how many containers I'll need for this bin. 1, 2, 3, 4. Probably about 20 containers or something like that. There'll be spaces between them. And the other thing I thought is, because the corners of these bins have got a radius, if you imagine 4 of these together, you're going to get a sort of space down there, and it would be quite a good idea to stick some tubes down there for a bit of aeration. What I've got here is that's galvanised wire mesh, and I've made a sort of air pipe in the centre of the bin. This is PLA compostable cups, but I haven't got the heat there, so I've just put those into the top of the bin. If you just work them into a cold bin, they're not going to do anything. They might discolour a bit, but they won't actually break down. They need about 65 degrees Celsius to do anything. So that's my thinking anyway. It's a great way of sort of getting these worm beds up to speed. There's already lots of worms in there. I'm not going to go through it because you've already seen the sort of contents of my worm beds before. This material is a lot further broken down than I normally would use for a worm bin. But with the worm beds, what I do is I kind of feed those in situ and use it more for habitat rather than just purely for compost. And that tower in the centre has got corrugated cardboard around it as well. Corrugated cardboard's permeable, so it allows a little bit of air and a bit of moisture through as well. But I did notice there was a lot of worms around that central sort of core, so I don't know what's going to be around here. They've probably retreated because I've been working around. Yeah, you can see there's a reasonable amount of worms in there, even with me interrupting them. Yeah, so that's the idea. So what have I got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'll say 250 litres, so that's around probably about a quarter of a tonne of compost, but just in containers, so it's a 5-minute job to lift them out and turn them. And then this is the bin that's got the aeration at the bottom as well. So when I've got these bins sitting on there, they'll have an air sort of vent right underneath the base of the bins. Some of these bins are just completed, well, part composted material. Some I've got compost rolls sort of set up as well. So that's marked sort of Thomas Paine's compost roll sort of method. But what I'd like to do is get some of these working alongside a warm, hot composting bin for a little bit more temperature as well. And then this one is compost rolls. That's one of my worm towels. I've just got that up to, got the worms to move in from the compost bin itself. I'm only really using these because the materials are free and they're locally available. I wouldn't pay money for the containers if I was going to do this, although if you can find bale arm crates, that would work quite well as well, and they stack. So that would be another method of doing this. It's really just to kind of minimise the amount of effort in terms of shoveling, so all you're doing is just putting the materials into a container to start with, and then once they're in that container you can just shoot them straight out, shoot into another one, take those out when you're ready to mulch. You've got a big 25 litre container, so it's kind of convenient. And I think they will add a little bit of structure. As it settles down, there'll probably be voids and things around in the bins themselves, and then if I can have some air pipes between them, I think that will work well. So there you go, another kind of idea.